So Jeff, long time since you've been on stage. I think the last time I saw you was when you did the Kindle Fire announcement.
Yes.
And I think actually there was something particularly that struck me there, and I'd like to believe for many others as well, that what you said there was that we should only win when our customers win.
Yeah.
So, and that's obvious how that works for Kindle probably, but I'd like to believe it works for AWS as well. Can you maybe elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, sure. Well, I would say, in fact, I think it's very similar to our Kindle device business. One of the unusual things that we do in the Kindle device business is we sell our hardware near break even. And so we make money when people use the device, not when they buy the device. And that is very aligning with customers. If I buy a device and I put it in my desk drawer and never use it, then Amazon doesn't deserve to make any money. Likewise, it causes us to have the right kinds of behaviors. So for example, if we're not making money when people buy the device, then we don't need people to be on the upgrade treadmill. We have people who are still using 5-year-old Kindle Ones, and we're perfectly happy about that. AWS is very similar because it's a pay-as-you-go service. We are not incented to get people to overbuy hardware, to operate at low utilization rates. Our point of view on this is if we can arrange things in such a way that our interests are aligned with our customers, then in the long term, that will work out really well for customers, and it'll work out really well for Amazon.
Okay. Actually, I'm always amazed that when you go talk to customers and you help them drive their bill down that month, they are extremely surprised because there's nothing they've ever seen with other vendors.
Yeah.
There's actually, so coming back to sort of the principles of Amazon, so you've always talked about flywheels.
Yeah.
And how actually if we really invest energy into flywheels and innovate there over dimension that doesn't seem too obvious, or actually that are really obvious, the things that never change for customers.
That's really a key point.
Yeah. So for retail, that's price, convenience, size of catalog, but there must be a flywheel in AWS as well.
For sure, and the way I think about this is, I very frequently get the question, what's going to change in the next 10 years? And that is an interesting question. It's a very common one. I almost never get the question, what's not going to change in the next 10 years? And I submit to you that that second question is actually the more important of the two. Because you can build a business strategy around the things that are stable in time. And so as you pointed out, in our retail business, we know that customers want low prices. And I know that's going to be true 10 years from now. They want fast delivery. They want vast selection. It's impossible to imagine a future 10 years from now where a customer comes up to me and says, Jeff, I love Amazon. I just wish the prices were a little higher. You know how I love Amazon. I just wish you delivered a little more slowly. Impossible. And so the effort that we put into those things, spinning those things up, we know the energy we put into it today will still be paying dividends for our customers 10 years from now. And so when you have something that you know is true, even over the long term, you can afford to put a lot of energy into it. On AWS, the big ideas are also pretty straightforward. It's impossible for me to imagine that 10 years from now, somebody is going to say, I love AWS, I just wish it were a little less reliable. Or I love AWS, I just wish you would raise prices. It should be a little more expensive. Or I love AWS, and I wish you would innovate and improve the APIs at a slightly slower rate. None of those things you can imagine. And so the big ideas in business are often very obvious, but it's very hard to maintain a firm grasp of the obvious at all times. But if you can do that, and continue to spin up those flywheels and put energy into those things, as we're doing with AWS, over time, you build a better and better service for your customers on the things that genuinely matter to them.
So what are really the most important principles for innovation? What should companies look at? What are real innovative companies? What do you think? Is Flywheels the only one, or are there more?
The, there are a few things I think if you want to be an innovative company that you have to do. First of all, I think innovation is a point of view. You have to actually select people that are part of the company who want to innovate and explore. Being a pioneering company, an explorer company, isn't for everybody. Some people wake up in the morning and they get their energy, the thing they think about in the shower is they start their annual planning process, or however you want to think about it, with who are the 3 companies that we're going to kill this year. That's the conqueror mentality. And it's a competitor-focused mentality instead of a customer-focused mentality. And there's nothing, that mentality can succeed, by the way. So I'm not claiming, the pioneering explorer approach is the only effective one. But when you attract people who have the DNA of pioneers and the DNA of explorers, you build a company of like-minded people who want to invent. And that's what they think about when they get up in the morning. How are we going to work backwards from customers and build a great service or a great product? That's a key element to invention. And that part is fun, by the way. So if you're the right kind of person and you like to invent, you like change, everything you see as you move about the world, you think how it could be improved, that's just fun. And we at Amazon, we've over the last 18 plus years attracted a bunch of people like that, and we have a ton of fun doing it. Yeah. Now there are a couple of other things that are essential for innovation and invention that are not as fun. One of them is you have to have a willingness to fail. You have to have a willingness to be misunderstood for long periods of time. If you do something in a new way, and I don't care what it is, people are initially going to misunderstand it relative to the traditional way. And there'll be well-meaning critics who, genuinely want the best outcome, but they're worried about this new way. And there'll also be, of course, self-interested critics who have a vested interest in the traditional, they have some profit stream tied to the traditional way. But doing things, if you never want to be criticized, for goodness sake, don't do anything new. So it's okay though, if you have a willingness to be misunderstood for long periods of time, if you have a willingness to fail, then what you can do is you can ramp up your rate of experimentation. So successful invention is inventions that customers care about. It's actually relatively easy to invent new things that customers don't care about. But successful invention, if you want to do a lot of that, you basically have to increase your rate of experimentation. And that you can think of as a process. How do you go about organizing your systems, your people, all of your assets, your own daily life and how you spend time? How do you organize those things to increase your rate of experimentation? Because not all of your experiments are going to work.
Actually, I like to believe that one of the things that we see out in industry by using the Amazon Web Services is that companies now are really capable of doing experimentation at a rate that they were never able to do before.
Absolutely. AWS is one of those enablers that helps companies experiment faster. Yep. Increase the rate of experimentation. How many experiments can you do per year? Mm-hmm. If you double the number of experiments you do per year, you're going to double your inventiveness.
Yep. Now, one of the examples I recently saw is that at News International, they were able to bring their development environment down from something that took some 56 days to get to instantiate to something that only takes a few hours. If you can do that, then suddenly you can run all sorts of experiments.
Exactly right.
So what's been your biggest surprise with AWS?
My biggest surprise with AWS, by far, is the growth rate of AWS over the last 6 or 7 years, and especially amongst enterprises and government, education. I was very optimistic, and I think the whole team was very optimistic that we would be successful with startup companies, although even that has happened much faster than I would have predicted. But certainly, this early into something that's new as AWS, to see so much traction amongst government and enterprise and education is a huge surprise for me.
Mm-hmm. So actually, something just struck me going back to actually to sort of the retail side of things. You've always said that because much of the innovations and inventions that we do are really customer focused. You've always said that customers have access to perfect information.
Yes.
Yeah. So what did you mean by that, and how important has that been to Amazon in the way that we develop things?
Well, I see this as a societal trend that, and I think it's been going on for a long time. I think the internet has accelerated the rate of this trend. But basically, customers are empowered with every passing year with better and better, near perfect information. So in our retail business, we see that in how easy it has become over the last 15 years to do comparison shopping. Price bots, etc. The menu, you can just a couple of clicks. If you compare that to driving around to different stores or even phoning different stores, a lot of friction to do price comparison shopping. And so it's not just about prices, though. You see it in, the blogosphere. You see it on Facebook. You see it anywhere that customers can talk, discussion boards about products and services. Let's put it this way. If in the old days you might be best advised to put 30% of your energy and effort into building a great product or service, and then 70% of your effort and energy into shouting about that service, that has flipped around. And basically the balance of power is shifting from the providers of services, the providers of offerings, to the consumers of offerings. And I believe that's a great thing for society. I even believe it's a great thing for the companies that provide the services, as long as they acknowledge it and embrace it. If you have a business model that in part relies upon your customers being misinformed, or let's just say incompletely informed, you'd better start working on changing your business model.
Absolutely. So 70-30, one thing that I within AWS we've always seen is that we flip the 70-30 around as working on infrastructure versus focusing on the customer, and now being able to flip these two things around.
Absolutely. If you look at the APIs, AWS would not have the leadership position. We have a very good sales force at AWS, but it's dwarfed by the big sales forces of the companies who've been working on enterprise sales for decades. And AWS is not winning because we have the biggest sales force. It's winning because we have the products and services that we have.
But also because there's a concept of lean in there, removing waste, making sure we focus absolutely only on the customer and not on anything else, really delivering there. Lean manufacturing, the thinking of lean has always been very important in the company. Yeah, and I actually was really struck at one moment how you applied the concepts and the principles of lean towards like the Andon Court in customer service. Yeah. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I'll tell you that story. I also want to point out that one of the key things about lean, defect reduction, being efficient, not letting defects travel downstream in any process. If you're going to eliminate waste, or as the Japanese call it, muda, you have to have information. And the data center has historically been an information-free zone as far as application developers are concerned. You would write code, and you have no idea how it's consuming resources. You're too insulated because you're in a pool of resources, and you can't meter it. One of the biggest, still unappreciated benefits of AWS is that application developers get a real sense of which inner loop is driving all the cost.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal. So that's just starting to, that's one of the ways that this approach to infrastructure dramatically reduces costs. In our data center, in our fulfillment centers and in our customer service centers, we have we're always seeking to keep defects from moving downstream. So this is a a principle that was probably best applied in the early, or first best applied by Toyota. And they had this idea of what they call the andon cord, which basically any factory worker could pull the cord and stop the whole automobile manufacturing line. And for old school auto manufacturing companies, that was considered crazy, absolutely insane. In fact, the opposite principle was typically at work, which is you did everything possible to keep that line running. And here Toyota flipped that on its head and they said, look, anytime there's a defect, no matter how small, we want you to pull the cord and stop the whole line. And stopping things, you know, if you do that in a line that has a lot of defects, initially you get a lot of andon cord pulls and it's very expensive. But over time, if you use that approach, you eliminate the defects closer and closer to the source. And the people who are fans of lean manufacturing and these kinds of techniques take almost as an article of faith, although there's a lot of evidence to support this in very diverse industries, that the further a defect travels downstream, the more expensive it becomes to fix. And so you want to stop those things. You don't want them to repeat and happen over and over. Well, I was in all the senior people at Amazon do 2 days of customer service training every other year. And several years ago now, I was in one of those customer service training sessions, and I was taking calls from customers. I had an experienced customer service agent with me, listening in, helping me figure out how to use the tools, keeping me out of trouble, making sure that I did a good job for the customer. And the customer, this particular call that I got, the customer, as soon as we pulled up her order, the experienced customer service agent leaned over to me and whispered in my ear and said, she's going to want to return that table. She had purchased a piece of furniture, a table. So I'm talking to the customer to the customer, and the customer says, I need to return this table. And it turned out that the top of the table was scratched. It was packaged poorly. And then, so we finished up and we handled the return and got all that done. And I said to the agent, how did you know that the customer was going to return that table? She said, oh, that table always gets returned. And so, what does that mean? That means that, you know, it's an anecdote, but if you systematize that and kind of pull back, it means that there's no communication flowing from these people who are talking to the customers every day back to our fulfillment centers where the actual shipping and packaging is going on. And it's very difficult to get that communication to happen. It can't just happen easily. So we built a kind of, inspired by the idea of an andon cord, where any customer service agent can pull a product off of the Amazon website if they think that there's a problem. And then, of course, having pulled that product off, that sets in place a whole series of processes that go back, but we're not going to ship the same table to the same customer over and over. I have another, I was in a fulfillment center now, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and we were doing a Kaizen training session with a Japanese consultant. He was elderly guy, maybe 70 years old, very tall, maybe 6 feet tall or so, and he had a female Japanese translator. He didn't speak any English, and he was, from the Toyota school of Kaizen, and he didn't call himself a consultant. He called himself an insultant, and he was teaching us some of these Toyota techniques, and he was very fiery. He really had he was very emotive, and he would shout at us in Japanese, and his translator, this female Japanese, she was probably 4'10", and she copied his emotions perfectly. So she would translate to English and just shout at us like this. And one afternoon, this was a week-long thing, and on about day 4, he saw me a little ways away sweeping up some dust in the fulfillment center. And he came over to me and he said, "Mr. Bezos, I am all in favor of a clean fulfillment center, but tell me, why do you sweep? Why do you not instead eliminate the source of dirt?" And I realized it's still going to be, there's still a lot of wax on, wax off before we get all the way there, but we're making progress. And by the way, I think all of these principles, we operate in a low margin way in our retail business, but also in AWS, and all of these principles can be applied to Amazon Web Services.
Yeah. Actually, coming to low margins, I mean, yesterday and also today, we talked a lot about how AWS is a high volume, low margin business. And retail is, of course, notorious for its razor thin margins,
yes.
Maybe. What are the particular challenges there? I mean, if you have to build a business that is based on razor thin margins, how do you do that?
Well, some of what we've just been talking about is essential. And it's not easy. So operating a low margin business is hard. I sometimes have waking dreams that I might one day operate a high margin business. And, then I wake up fully. And but the high margins will also cover a lot of sins. And so if you have high margins, it's impossible to be efficient with high margins because you don't need to be. And necessity is the mother of invention. And so it takes a certain point of view to figure out how to operate in a low margin business, but it's something we wouldn't know any other way. We've been doing it this way for 18 years, and it's deep in our culture to figure out how to do that. So it's hard, but it's worth it. And I'll tell you, I like it because I think it's more aligning with customers. You get more usage, but and it keeps you honest with having to operate leanly and efficiently. It won't keep me from occasionally having dreams.
So that's 18 years ago.
Like take up a luxury handbag company or something.
80%?
I think more.
Good.
You don't have to sew efficiently if you're selling the bag at 400% margin or whatever it is. Yeah. Okay. Markup.
I can also dream.
That might be like a vacation business.
Yeah. 18 years ago, you were an entrepreneur. Yeah, really, it's been quite a wild ride. I was fortunate to be part of it for a while. How has entrepreneurship changed since you started Amazon? Has it changed?
Well, I don't know. Maybe at its core, I don't know if it has changed, but I think entrepreneurship, some of the basic principles of entrepreneurship, I think, are very stable in time. Probably have not changed. I'll tell you what. If I narrow your question to the internet arena, I would say that one thing that's changed is the rate of change today is even faster than it was 18 years ago when we opened Amazon's doors to the public. So it's astonishing how much energy and change and invention and entrepreneurship is happening on the internet today, how big the internet is, how many ecosystems and sub-ecosystems there are. And so that has been a very big change. The heart of entrepreneurship in some ways is about risk-taking, but I think that many people misperceive what good entrepreneurs do. Good entrepreneurs don't like risk. They seek to reduce risk. So they are, starting a company is already risky, and then you systematically eliminate risk step by step in those early days until you can get a company. You need a lot of, believe me, you need a lot of luck in all endeavors in life. And certainly Amazon has had, planetary alignment of the highest order. lots of luck in our history, but you also need to systematically try to identify risks, and then as the company gets bigger and more robust, you can start taking risks again. But in those early days, a lot of it is about, okay, we have a good idea. How do we reduce risk?
I like to believe that we've been with AWS somewhat that we've caused the acceleration of change.
No question. Well, the acceleration of experimentation, the reduction in the need for capital. I have venture capital friends in the venture capital business who will say, Bezos, wait, the entrepreneurs don't need my money anymore. You're killing me here. But there is a whenever you empower people with new tools, you get unexpected and beautiful results. And we're seeing that. I think we're still in the early innings of seeing the kinds of change that AWS can bring to a whole group of entrepreneurs, including entrepreneurs inside companies.
Yeah. Actually, so if I look at VCs, the things I hear now, although maybe in the beginning they've had that sort of reaction, they've seen it now as an opportunity to be able to invest in many more companies than that they would have been able in the past.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't feel sorry for them. They'll figure something out.
Okay. Eric Ries, who wrote a book about the lean startup, I think he makes a point that entrepreneurs are not only those who run startups. I think in the current economic climate,
absolutely,
enterprises need to be as entrepreneurial as others. And I think he has a great definition. He says a startup is an organization that develops new products or services under conditions of extreme uncertainty.
Yeah.
And I like to believe that these days, for enterprises, the world is equally uncertain to be equivalent with.
Yeah, and by the way, I think even in good times, any illusion of certainty is just that.
Okay. Talking about enterprises, so can AWS be a business that goes after enterprises and startups at the same time?
I know we can because it's working. We have an existence proof, and it's startups, it's enterprise, it's also government, it's education. The reason that it works for all those different parties is the customer needs of those parties are not on the big things are not that different. Everybody wants low costs. Everybody wants reliability. Everybody wants the innovative set of fast evolving APIs and services. Even you look at some of the things that you might be motivated to do for enterprise, some of the certifications and things like that. Having done that for enterprise, it actually helps everybody.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the well-known enterprises that runs on AWS is Netflix. I think yes. They are somewhat of a competitor to Amazon Instant Video. So they're big customers, both of them on our platform. Should we be worried that Netflix and Amazon Instant Video both make use of the same platform?
No. Prime Instant Video and Amazon Instant Video compete against Netflix? Yes. Should we be worried? No. We put just as much care into Netflix on AWS as we do Amazon Retail on AWS. We treat them just as well. We may compete on Prime Instant Video, but we bust our butts every day for Netflix on the AWS side.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure about that because you cannot run a business like AWS and make an exception for one particular customer, even if it's Amazon.com. Yeah, and there's no code that says Amazon goes left.
The whole point of what we're doing with AWS is to standardize that layer.
Absolutely.
And so, Amazon Retail gets the benefit from the standardization of that layer.
Yeah, and you want it to be standardized. I want the Amazon engineers to make use exactly standardized components.
Yeah, you don't want, customized things don't work as well. No. Just check, if you ever have like a fancy home theater system, it never works as well as like one you just buy from the store and take out of the box.